All right, if you've ever wondered what the common problems associated with these second generation Ram 1500 trucks are, I got a quick vid for you. Watch the Car Doctor channel. Greetings, welcome back to the channel. I'm Tim. I'm here at my repair shop, Donor Auto in Anchorage, Alaska, and just thought I'd put together a quick vid highlighting the common problems associated with these second gen Ram 1500 trucks. This one's a 98, it's got the 5.9. You could have one equipped with the 3.9, the 5.2, or the 5.9 motor. This one's the four-wheel drive SLT Lariat. They come in the LT, ST, and SLT trim versions. This one's equipped with the cassette tape, AM, FM. It's the high-end luxury model. Typically on a common problems video, I would probably showcase like maybe 6 or 8 different trucks to kind of highlight the broader spectrum of the common problems. But this one in particular looks like it has every common problem that they come with. So I thought this would be a good representation of that. It's got 100 grand on the clock, and let's just run through a quick rundown of some of these issues. With the second gen Dodge Ram came the introduction of the big rig looking front clip, the heavy duty appearance, which is a reminder that some things are not as they appear. But as my friends in Newfoundland say, at least it's not a third generation Dodge Ram. All right off the bat, we see this is equipped with the performance braking system, the very vented front brake rotor. It's actually a common issue affecting this year model with this many miles. In fact, it's probably not the first time it's needed brake work, but it definitely needs more than just your average set of pads and maybe a rotor. It's going to need these calipers. This piston is hyperextended. The rotor is worn through to the vanes on the inside. This thing's trashed. It's seen better days. Common problems associated with these braking systems, especially after some age, these caliper pistons do tend to rust and start hanging up. Now you see some brake fluid coming out of this piston seal. But definitely a common problem. The brake rotors, the calipers tend to seize up, causing a failure of the front brake system. This does have some fresh brakes on the back. I'll show you those, but it has a shoe type braking system on the rear, rotors on the front, and in this case we're going to need to do calipers, rotors, and pads on the front. While we got it up, we always shake down the suspension, and in this case it's pretty shaky. All right, common problem number 2 associated with the front steering and suspension, ball joint wear. Now, these do have what's called a radial upper ball joint, and some up-down movement is acceptable. There's a measured level and amount. However, this is far beyond, and it actually has lateral play on the lower joint, way beyond what's within tolerance and an acceptable level. Both side front suspension upper and lower ball joints are completely trashed on this rig. But wait, there's more. Again, this is the four-wheel drive model with the Dana front end. So a two-wheel drive model, slightly different with an independent front suspension. However, about the same mileage, you'll begin to get ball joint failure. This four-wheel drive version is equipped with this track bar. Okay, so similar deal here. Another joint here and a bushing on the other end. The track bar keeps the front end from moving laterally from side to side. And as you can see in this case, this joint allows for quite a bit of movement in that differential, probably a ½ inch or more side to side. So the track bar, you want to check the bushing end and the joint end, but this is toasted, along with every other joint on the steering system. And then as you can see, every other joint on the steering system is totally worn out and loose. I'll try to get a good view here. This is the drag link or pitman arm in. That joint is smoked there. By the way, this vehicle was very unsafe to drive. I drove it here, not a good idea. Every other steering linkage, tie rod in, is completely worn out. Then finally we see the steering stabilizer here. This kind of prevents death wobble or whatnot. It's completely failed. It has no dampening of the steering system. So this is going to need to be replaced as well. Now we turn to the sway bar end links. This prevents sway and improves handling. And in this case, it just absolutely completely broke out and failed. We're going to put some higher quality sway bar end links here and get that squared away. Moving on, the outer wheel end U-joints here, completely trashed. As you can see, the needle bearings are missing out of these. This actually created quite a vibration under light acceleration. So this is kind of a full-time four-wheel drive system. This created a kind of what feels like a wheel vibration, out of balance tire or something like that, but on light acceleration, she was vibrating a bit. So that's going to need to be squared away. I did discover that the left front spring seat or spring bucket or perch is highly corroded, and that is a common problem with this front suspension on particularly the 4x vehicles. In this case, we are able to replace just the spring bucket with a Dorman aftermarket repair part. We just cut that lower spring seat out after removing the coil and then weld in a new one. That'll get this thing back on the road safely. The HVAC on this vehicle is fairly robust. However, with vehicles that did not have properly maintained cooling systems, the heater core becoming restricted and clogged and a low heat output was a common problem. The blower motors on these actually hold up fairly well. This one looks like an original equipment installed blower motor. It's producing plenty of air movement, good heat out of this one. Luckily, again, this is not a third generation Dodge truck, which were plagued with blower motor, wiring, resistor, and control circuit problems. A very common problem with this truck is the automatic transmission in both the 2- and 4-wheel drive models. The standard duty transmission was fairly problematic. This starter is bad. It's a gear reduction style starter. It's just the, it clicks a few times and then it'll go. We're replacing the starter. It's fairly easy to access and a fairly common problem. Let's talk fuel system briefly. It is an in-tank fuel pump. It does not have an external filter. The filter is mounted in the pump module itself. It is a common problem. Typically 100 to 130,000 miles. It would not be uncommon for you to experience a fuel pump failure, which is going to require removal of the fuel tank and accessing the pump module to replace it. If you do experience that, I recommend sticking with the OE part in this case. You do not want to put a crappy Airtex pump in there. You'll have nothing but trouble. Fairly robust 4x system, not as problematic as the newer versions of the Dodges with the terrible front end. And this rear end is holding up well, no external leakage. Just a slight bit of leakage from this axle seal on the right rear. The brakes were recently redone. We'll probably just clean that up, make a note of it, and let that go for now. One other element on the other end of the fuel system is the introduction of the first returnless fuel system, the fuel injection system does not return and circulate through the fuel tank, thus is subject to any type of contaminants introduced to the fuel system that get past the pump mounted filter assembly, will end up on top of your injectors. If you get a serious amount of corrosion or glop in the fuel tank, they're going to wind up sitting on top of your injectors and causing a misfire issue. Although this truck does have a misfire issue, it's related to something else in the ignition system. I'm not really a Dodge guy, but really I don't have a high opinion of any of the three major domestic truck producers in America. That said, I always look at a repair job and try to decide, is this an ethical fix? And maybe a few years ago this one wouldn't have been, but nowadays there's just no inventory up here. My customer, who I respect, recently purchased this at a fire sale price, and he's going to put a few bucks into it to make it safe to drive. He wanted a truck that he could retire after paying off, and he went around looking at new stuff and decided that he didn't want to go 70 grand in debt for a not reliable vehicle to begin with. So this is where he ended up. I respect that. And we're going to make it safe to drive and hopefully get a few more miles out of it. This vehicle had an obvious misfire condition present at both idle and 2,500 RPM. It's got the 5.9 motor in this case, and after doing a cylinder balance test, isolated to the major contributor being cylinder 8, and upon removal of the spark plugs and inspection, found that the number 8 cylinder plug was severely oil fouled, along with most of the others. They have been serviced, and given this lower mileage, shouldn't be exhibiting this condition. We obviously have some valve guide wear, valve stem seal type issues, very common with this 5.9 motor. And in this case, the customer opted to, at this point, install spark plugs and see if we can milk a few miles out of this before needing some major internal engine repairs or most likely engine replacement. One quick note while we're talking about ignition systems: if you end up with a no spark situation, you may want to take a close look at the crank position sensor. The crank position sensor on this vehicle is actually mounted to the bell housing at the face of the transmission. It's a royal pain to replace, and if you do have a faulty crank position sensor, you want to definitely go with OE parts. As for all of the ignition system, stick with the Champion spark plugs that came OE. On this one, they're a conventional plug. They're fairly inexpensive, but you may end up with misfire issues if you go with an aftermarket weird platinum or precious metal type spark plug. I would just recommend staying away from that, doing a more regular maintenance of the ignition system, and using OE plugs and ignition parts. Other crank but won't start issues may be related to the ignition coil and the powertrain control module. Both are common faults on this vehicle. Okay, a very common problem to have with this truck: wiper problems. Either the wipers won't work at all, the wipers won't park, the intermittent wiper won't work. This is equipped with what they call pulse wiper. It has a setting for basically a delay of the wipers on the low setting. But in this case, we have several different problems. We have bad wiper blades. We have non-functioning pulse. Low speed does not function. High speed functions at a reduced speed, and then it won't park properly. You turn the wiper off and it just stops wherever you turn the switch off. This is typically the park switch in the wiper motor itself. The easiest way to diagnose this is to remove the cowl where the wipers go through, above the, just below the window there, the little vented cowl. Remove the arms, the wiper blades, the cowl, and access the motor and tap on it. If it parks and works properly after tapping on it, it's a bad motor. That's likely the case. That's certainly the case in this instance. But also there's a problem with the low speed circuit on the switch. So we're going to need to replace the switch, the blades of course, and the wiper motor under the cowl. The wiper motor is part of an assembly with the linkages, and sometimes the linkages do fail on these. This entire assembly is available from Dorman. It is one option, but don't be surprised if it lasts 6 months or a year and then takes the dump. In this case, the linkage is okay at this point, and we're just going to transfer the wiper motor assembly. Here's a closer look at that spring seat or spring bucket on the left front that's corroded out. So this part here available from Dorman. So we're just going to cut this off where it attaches to the front axle assembly and brackets, and then we'll weld the other one in place. That'll be fixed up good as new. As you can see, we've worked over the front suspension on this one, did the upper and lowers, the inner wheel end U-joints, complete brake job with calipers, rotors, and pads, all the steering linkage, the sway bar end links, the drag link, and all that good stuff. Good for another 100,000. Here's the new spring seat welded in place. Pretty easy, just chop the old one out, weld the new one in place, and go ahead and paint it. As soon as it cools off here, reassemble. We'll go ahead and scrub this down a little bit. We don't do that with every repair, but this one was quite extensive, so anything helps, I'm sure. Spent a few bucks on the repairs. This is Anchorage, Alaska. It's not cheap, but you know, he'll be able to get a few miles out of this one. It may end up needing the motor here. It's definitely consuming some oil, and it's still leaking into number 8. But it's running half decent and driving pretty good. So we'll get him back on the road. I appreciate you watching. Have a good one.